the previous episode, we built the TechPub category viewer, which allowed us to view the categories for the TechPub videos that we would like to watch. We went a little fast in building the UI and pretty much pasted a bunch of XML code to define the layout to see how it would work, and we walked through the code to understand the code. In this episode, what we're going to do is take a little time to understand how we got to that UI, what was involved in developing it, and how we wrote the XML to get the UI to display what we wanted to display. The topic of what we really want to build the next time is when we click on a category, we want someone to be able to see what's inside of the category. In this instance, we might be working with the Coder to Developer series. We want to show the details of the episode, and we'd also like to show the episodes and maybe a brief little information with a little ellipse at the end letting them know that there's actually some more information, and they could select that to go to the video page. What we want to do is maybe our designer has given us a PSD or Photoshop file or a JPEG, anything like that, and said, here's what I want the screen to look like. Or maybe you've designed it in Photoshop or even a paint program, or just have this in mind. How do we get from this concept that we have on the screen here to actually XML type of layout? So this is where we're going here. Now we have three options when we're developing UI. The first option is to use a built-in designer that Android provides for you, and we'll cover that here shortly. The second option is to use a tool called DroidDraw, and the third option is to handwrite the XML. I prefer the option of number 3, handwriting the XML, and anyone who has worked with any type of XAML, that's XAML, the WPF and Silverlight layout language, will let you know that once you understand the XML, it's much easier to work with. And though the tools can help you a lot in designing some complex things, Android isn't that far along as WPF or Silverlight in that regard, so you have to hop back down into the raw XML a lot of time and just kind of bang out some code. So let's hop over and take a look at the solution that we have. So we're back here at the TechPub solution. What we have up at the top left-hand corner of the screen here is the TechPub solution, and inside of the SRC folder you see that we have a little red icon right here, and this red icon is just letting us know that we have an error, and that error that we have right now is there's some code that's already been written to work with some layouts, but we're gonna go ahead and write these layouts right now for us. And to do that, we're gonna go ahead and use the first tool, which is the designer. But first, before we can even get to the designer, we need to understand how we can get to a layout. So there's a couple options. You can just manually right click the layout folder, say new, say file. You could do other and choose XML file, all different kinds of stuff such as Android XML file, and click next, and it's going to ask you what type of Android XML file you'd like. We're going to click cancel, or you can go up top here, and in the top portion we have the Android ADT plugin bits, and go with AVD Manager, new project, Android JUnit, and this is an Android XML file here at the end. So this is the one that we're going to want, so let's click on that one. It's going to give us the same little new Android XML file wizard. So the project is going to be TechPub. That's the project that we're currently working within, which is right here. The file is going to be the name of the file. So let's just call this video main.xml. And so this is going to be the main video page, so when someone selects a category, it's going to take them to the main video page. So we'll have like the TechPub logo, the logo for the series, the description, the title, and a list of all of the videos that are inside of the series. It's asking us next, what type of resource would we like to create? Well, we're going to create a layout here, so let's choose the layout which is by default chosen. There's a couple other ones here that we can also work with, such as values, menu, app widget provider, preferences, searchables, and animations. There's a lot of other XML files we can create, such as inside of values we can create strings, we can create dimensions, a whole bunch of other ones, but right now we're only worried about layout. So since we've selected layout, we don't need to worry about anything inside of this area here. We want the folder to be res layout, which it is by default. So as soon as we change these items up top here, this item down here will change. So if we select values, you'll see that this is now changed to values. We select layout, it has now gone back down to layout. Also notice that the root element of the XML file has also been enabled for layout. If we select values, there is no root XML layout because there are just certain values that we want to plug in there. And we can say menu, and we see that now it's changed to menu. So the little wizard has a little bit of smarts to it. We'll go back to select layout again, And then we can define what kind of layout would we like. And this is the root element of the XML file. Now, we have a bunch of different layout options, and these layout options are absolute layout, we have relative layouts, we have view groups, we have frame layouts. There's a whole bunch of different options here, and there's a great resource on the Android site, and it is under Declaring Layout on the Dev Guide under Framework Topics, User Interface, Declaring Layout. Inside of here, it kind of runs through all of a bunch of different scenarios that you might be using. It also tells you about the hierarchy viewer tool, which will allow you to view hierarchies, how Android is seeing it in real time at runtime, and we'll kind of hop into that as well shortly. Also, how to use the layout optimization tool. Different layouts, such as a linear layout, is going to react a little bit differently than a relative layout. Now, a linear layout is going to be something that will have items stacked on top of each other. So we might have a text box on top of another text box, on top of a button, or pretty much as things show up inside of the XML, that's the order in which they're going to be viewed on the user interface. We also have things like relative layouts, where we say we may have a button that we want to shove to the right hand side of the screen at all times. So regardless if the phone is in a normal portrait style, so you're kind of holding it like you normally would, or if it's in a landscape style, maybe you've turned it sideways to use the on-screen keyboard or the slide-out keyboard, we want to make sure that button's always in the top right-hand corner, and we always want to make sure there's a text box on the left-hand corner. And so you can use relative layouts to kind of more fluidly say, hey, when everything kind of changes, I just want to make sure that this item is always next to this item, or this item is always below this other item over here. The article here will walk through a lot of these different things, such as writing the XML down here, talking about linear layouts. As we said, here's a linear layout, which is taking a text view and laying it over a button. Now, an important thing to note about each layout file must contain exactly one root element. So we'll see that right here. So, which can be a view or a view group object. So, if we take a look at view group, let's go into the Android reference here, and we will click view group. So inside of view group, it's a special view that can contain other views. Now, the direct subclasses of this are the absolute layout here, adapter view, frame layout, linear layout, relative, sliding, and then there's a bunch of other ones here which are indirect subclasses. So you could have spinners, tab hosts, zoom controls, all different kinds of things. The ones that we're going to work with today, the direct subclasses are actually going to be the linear layout, and the relative layout is what we're going to talk about most today. The other one that's going to be some people like to use is the absolute layout. This is very familiar to people who do a lot of GUI programming. For example, maybe Java GUI programming or Windows GUI programming, and where you design a form and you put it on the screen, and it has maybe it has two buttons, and the buttons are always going to be down here in the corners of the screen, and there's always going to be some text boxes here, and you really don't care about relative sizes because you're not going to allow the user to change the size of the screen. You've kind of restricted it. So an absolute layout is the same type of thing. You pretty much say, I want this text box here, I want the other text box here, and I always want this button here. And all it's really doing is providing XY coordinates for these locations here and drawing those controls on the screens, or in Android's case, the views on the screens. So an absolute layout allows you to definitely place where you would like things to show up on the screen. When we hop into the next tool, DroidDraw, I'll show you that as well. So if we got back over to declaring layout, there is a couple of things that you need to be aware of when we're declaring layouts. The first thing is that we always need a layout width and a layout height. So a layout width is how big is the layout going to be in regards to how wide, what's the distance we want to be here, how wide is the view. The layout height is how tall we want it to be. So we have the height and the width. There's a couple different options here. The first option here is a wrap content, and the second option is fill parent. Now, there's two different options are very important to grasp, because what wrap content actually does is it will actually wrap the content. So if you have a bunch of text here that kind of looks like this, and it only takes up that amount of space, and that's a text view, that text view is only going to take up that amount of space right there. If you have something else, such as the fill parent, you may have a text box that is this big, but you may only have 2-3 words inside of there, but it's still going to take up the entire width of the screen. So if this is your phone screen right here, it would take up the entire screen. If you were to provide both of them, such as we're doing here, layout width and layout height, you can define if you would like your application to take up the full width of the screen, but maybe you only want it just to, as content kind of pops in there, you just kind of want it to grow. So in this instance, we have a layout width of fill parent and a layout height of wrap content. Kind of flowing off the screen here, but we have a little quote over here. The other option that we have as well is to take one where we want to fill the parent but kind of wrap the content as we're going the other way around. So as content kind of fills out, we kind of want this to really kind of grow a little further out, and as they get some more content, we want to fill it out a little bit more and down the line. So the content eventually kind of starts growing this way. And what this ends up being is a layout width equals wrap content and layout height of fill parent. Now we have one other option as well. Maybe we have a layout here. Here's our phone again on the screen, but this time we just want to kind of have a text box right here, and kind of whatever kind of pops in there, I want this text box to also go this way as well as go this way. So as soon as the content gets wide enough, I want it to start doing both things. So maybe later on down the road, let's say down the road, the text box may be that big because some user has entered some text, or we pulled some data down from the web, wherever you may be pulling it, local resources, etc. But we want it to be able to grow like that. So what this actually is going to be a layout width of wrap content and a layout height of wrap content. So you can kind of start mix and matching these together, and you'll eventually have maybe a layout that has one of these and something that has one of these, and then you have another one of these, and before you know it, you're doing a fill parent, and you can start kind of combining these views and stacking them over and over and over. So each thing that you put inside of the screen, be it a button, be it a layout, be it anything that derives from view, you have to put a layout width and a layout height attribute on it. And that's done, as we see here, inside of this code block here, in the example provided on the Android documentation website. We're providing the XML namespace in here, Android, which is defined right here. So inside of the root layout, we're saying here is the Android XML namespace. And then we said for the linear layout, we want it to fill the parent, and we want the parent to be filled as well. So taking what we just learned, that means that we have a phone here. Here's our phone. We want the linear layout to fill the parent, so we want it to take as much as it can get. So fill left and fill right. That's kind of what it means there. The next piece that we have here are the text view. So we have the text view here, which we kind of just have an ID and some text. We've kind of shown these things before, but it also has a layout width and a layout height. Now this one is saying wrap content, so it's going to kind of grow to the right and grow to the left. The same goes for the button down here. It has a wrap content of grow as big as the contents of the actual view are going to be. So in the contents in this case are going to be some text. So for the text view in the button, it's going to kind of grow to whatever the text inside of that view is. And if it needs to start wrapping, it'll wrap to the next line down. In the end, more along the lines of resulting in this. If this is the text view and we have just some, foo bar in there, and then later on you get a bunch of more text in there, and maybe it needs to be a lot bigger, and you just have a lot of Greek text in there all the way down the line. And then the button, what would happen is the button is just going to get continually pushed down here. If you change the button text, the button would grow bigger, so making the button actually, you know, grow like this or like this down the line. So that's kind of the basics here. And if you visit the developer.android.com and check out the declaring layouts item right here, it'll give you a bunch of information in loading XMLs from resources, which is what we're doing here when we set a content view. You can get a lot of information, and we'll probably hop back to this a few times during this presentation here. If we hop back over to our new Android XML file wizard, we are going to create the video main.xml. So now that we've done that, we are going to use let's go ahead and create a relative layout, because I don't think it's to kind of be relative to other things. I want to provide an image to the left, and then to the right of the image I want it to be the categories image, and to the right of that image I would like it to have the different view for what the title of the category is going to be. So let's scroll down, or actually scroll up, and we'll select relative view, we'll hit finish. And now we are brought to the video main.xml designer. This is the built-in designer that we have for Eclipse and the ADT plugin. Unfortunately, this designer isn't really up to par with a lot of other designers you may have used, such as Blend for Visual Studio and WPF Silverlight development, or even the drag and drop support you're used to maybe in a lot of other IDEs like Visual Studio. But we do have some basic support here. And remember, down at the bottom down here, we have the option to switch back and forth between layout and video main. If we click video main, we're just going to see exactly what we have set up before. So we have a relative layout. We have now set up the Android namespace that we talked about before, and by default the ADT plugin threw in the 2 required attributes for those to be active. If we don't put those in, we're going to get an exception at runtime saying that they are not there. So they are required because Android needs to know how to lay out the view on the screen. It needs to know, should I auto grow this? Should I make sure it's a specific size? Should I fill it to parent? Whatever. We'll go down to the bottom, go back over to the layout tab. So bring us back to the designer. So we have a couple of different options here. And we have some layouts and some views. The layouts being here that we can drop into here, and some other views. So we can put some date pickers, some buttons already in there. And then there's some configuration options up here. We could choose a device. ADP1 is the Android Development Phone 1. ADP2 is the Android Development Phone 2. If I remember correctly, the difference between the 1 and 2 is version 1 is the T-Mobile G1, but it was just a development phone for developers. It wasn't really connected to a network. ADP2 was the T-Mobile MyTouch series type of phone, again just connected to like a local Wi-Fi network, and you can kind of just plug it in and develop on it. And then we have Nexus 1, and then you can also develop some other custom ones here, and you'll see that the Nexus 1 has some different configurations of how it might look. So we have the Nexus 1 has some configuration options here, and we say custom, we hit new, and then we can start saying the device name, the X DPI, the Y DPI, what's the dots per inch on the X and Y axis, and then we can start providing different configuration options. Cancel out of this. And we're just going to go ahead and work with the basic ADP1. You can switch over to the Nexus 1. This is useful because if perhaps your app is only going to support a specific device, you can load a device configuration in here, and the designer can kind of help you a little bit. And the reason why I say a little bit is this designer is very limited in what it can do. So again, we're in ADP1. There's a couple different configurations that it has. Is landscape closed, landscape open. Again, ADP1 was the T-Mobile G1 phone, and it had 2 options. In the landscape option, you had the open option, which meant that the keyboard was slid open. Here's what it looked like when the keyboard was slid open. And then you had the landscape closed. So if you had the keyboard closed, certain things would happen. And the one thing is that you would notice in these regards is, and this would happen in the new MyTouch 3G slide phone that was just released recently, is that when the phone is open, the keyboard is now accessible, so you can type with that. So there's no need to show an on-screen keyboard. However, if the phone is closed, you need to show an on-screen keyboard. So that's going to affect the way that your screen looks. It's going to kind of make your screen smaller because now they have a keyboard. You need to see what it looks like. Are you providing the proper hints and text tips to the input methods? So those are the different options there. If we go to Nexus 1, we'll see that our DPI just got a little bit bigger because the Nexus 1 is a high-density device. But we only have 2 options here. We have landscape and portrait. The Nexus One does not have a physical keyboard, so there's no open or close for the landscape option. There's just landscape and portrait. I can play with my Nexus One on the portrait mode with a smaller keyboard, or I can flip it sideways to landscape, and then I can play with the keyboard there. We're going to go back to ADP1. Again, ADP2, you can see the same thing. It was a MyTouch. MyTouch did not have a slide-out keyboard. The new MyTouch 3G Slide does have a keyboard, but these are just set up for Android Development Phone 1 and 2, and you could set up your own custom if you had it. Maybe you were developing something for an ebook reader and you needed to make sure that it only had certain options, so you could kind of come in here and say new, and then you may have certain pixel densities. It may only be portrait, so it's only going to have one type of configuration. Maybe it has a keyboard, maybe it doesn't, text input. So now we're working with ADP2, and we're in the landscape close mode. We can change this to portrait, and this is just going to show how it's going to look at portrait and landscape close, and we're not really doing anything different here because we don't have anything on the screen to show. We have locale, the United States, or we want to work in Europe or Portugal, whatever. We may set the locale, or we're just going to leave it blank. And then we have a theme. The theme option is how we want the theme to look, and by default the theme is the dark colored theme, like the theme black. You can also scroll down and select different themes here all the way down the line, so theme panel, blah blah blah. Or you can hit create and edit some other type of things inside of here. Then you also have the create button. If you click create, you can configure the alternate version of video main XML depending upon network code, region, version, all the way down the line. Some different qualifiers, and it will generate a new file for you, so we're not going to do that. Here is, in the middle, your designer. Now the designer is very limited in what it can do. We can drag a few things over, like let's drag a button over, and see now we got a button. The button has a few properties, and if we expand the window down below, and on your machine it may already be expanded, I like to work with it closed, gives me a little more room. Restore this back out, and then I'll scroll up a little bit, and I'm on the properties window, which is, I only see proper here, but it's the properties, and I have a bunch of stuff inside of here. And I can say auto link, and this are the properties for the highlighted control that we see up here. It's highlighted in red, which means it's going to be the properties that we see down here. So I can change the background if I want the background to be a particular different type of resource, a color. I have some drawables in here. I can make it a category Ajax, and then you see that the button is now changed to ASP.NET Ajax. That's not what I would really want, but you can actually change these things through the designer here. It can be clickable, non-clickable. Perhaps maybe you want a button not to be clickable upon the first load, and depending upon user interaction you want to enable it. And you have a bunch of various options. I really advise hopping in here and taking a look at these things. You know, you have editor extras, fit system windows, there's so many different options in here. We could spend hours and hours describing them. Haptic feedbacks enabled. You can include font padding, input type, all of that kind of stuff here. And some of these things derive from the base view class, others are specific to the button themselves. You could say when onClick is created, you want it to do something. You say, well, I want to choose a new string, I want it to do something different, all the way down the line. And we can just kind of see all these different down here. And then there's also deprecated ones, which you shouldn't use anymore because there's now something new used. For example, we have auto text, and they're saying use input type instead. So it helps people do things. And capitalize, we can throw some more options into input type. So if we scroll up to input type, we're going to see a bunch of options in here. So there's input type here. We'll select these. And there's a checkbox, a bunch of checkboxes here. And so this allows us, if this was an input box, we could say that this is going to be text multi-line, it's going to be or an email address. You know, some of these wouldn't work in correspondence with each other. You wouldn't have a multi-line email address probably, unless your email address is really long. But I don't know if you'd really want to display it on the UI like that. You can come down here, it could be a postal address. What this helps do is, for example, like number, is if you put number in there for the input type and it's an edit box, and let's just do that now. Let's delete the button. We'll come here and we'll hit delete. Remove, delete's not working. You have to click on it, right click, and hit remove. And so do you really want to remove the button from the relative layout? So hit yep. So let's scroll down to the views here. And then we're going to show a edit text, which is a text box. We'll drag that on the screen. And there's our edit text, and that's the ID of our edit text. So we have the @ sign, the plus, and an ID. What this allows us to do is find the ID when we're working with it inside of resources, and the name of the ID is edit text 01. And we could change that down here if we'd like to. But first, let's go here and just change some text. I'm just going to change this text to foobar. There's the text, and then I can come up and I can change the ID if I want. So there's the ID, and I can say it's going to be just called foobar text. I'm just putting an underscore there to separate the wording. And then what I would maybe want to do is come here and play with the input type. And so now what I can say is, then my input type, I want it to be a number. Now this is important because if this is a number, what it's going to give me is when someone selects that with the on-screen keyboard, it's going to give them an on-screen keyboard, but it's going to automatically turn all of the keyboard functions into numbers. So it's going to show just numbers, so I can type a number in there. If it's going to be a number that's a decimal, it's going to give me an editor which enables me to play with decimal numbers. If it's a date time, it's going to show me a date picker. If it's going to show all those different types of things down the line. Text filter, we can also show email address, and which is kind of nice because then it will actually give us an @ symbol on the on-screen keyboard with all the rest of the text, because we always have an @ symbol in email addresses. Each of the input methods are all supported in a different ways here. URIs, all different kinds of stuff here, so you can provide these options. You can select many of them. So maybe if it's going to be a multi-line text box and you want it to capitalize characters or capitalize sentences, and so it'll automatically capitalize the first letter of a sentence for you if you forget to do it. So these are different options you can provide. So now we've done this, we could take this and we can put a button next to that if we want to. We can come down here and say that we want maybe the layout width to be a little bit bigger than it is, and we can say fill parent. We see it kind of jumbled out there a little bit. Oh, that actually gave the width of the entire thing. But if we were to change it, let's hop back into the view to see what it did. It looks like it's under layout width and not just lit width. So we'll go down to the basic portions here. And there it is, layout height. If we scroll down further, we'll see layout width, and then we just change this to fill parent. Just tab off of it. Now we can see that the text box went all the way across the screen. Pretty simple. And then we can start dragging other things over here as well. We could put some buttons up here, and let's just put a button on this. Let's drag it over. The problem with the designer here is it's kind of limited in what it can do. If, for example, if you want to provide some type of background color or some shading, or at runtime you want to dynamically start adding items, if we have a list view, which we do in this case, we throw a list view inside of here at the bottom. We have a list view, but we don't see anything in here. If we go back to the video main, we'll see that we do have a list view inside of code. The other problem that I also have with the designer here is that when it does throw in these items, it throws them all in one line. And if you can see, the scroll bar down here is really big. And the last thing that I want to do is spend all day scrolling back and forth. I work on a laptop a lot of time, so I don't have a lot of these ways to view this. Now there's a way you can do it. You can hit Control-Shift-F, and it will automatically format it how Eclipse thinks it should view your text. I don't particularly like this. I like my XML to be a little more laid out, and I'll show you that in a second. But let's go back to layout. And so now we don't have a way to view the list view, and there's no way to set some basic data. So if we really want to see how this is going to work, I need to connect this to the emulator. I need to fire it up. I need to see, instead of a device, what it's going to look like. This is what we're going after. What we want to do is we want to figure out how we can get some items up top here, how we can get some kind of a text view, another text view, and then a list. Let's focus on the first part up top. So what we need to do is we need to put an image, which is the TechPub image, next to another image, which is the coder to developer, next to a text view. So we have three different views that we need to place next to each other. And there's a couple of different ways we can do that. And how I've chosen to do this is through a relative layout. I've decided to provide an image here, which will be to the right-hand side of TechPub, and the coder to developer here will be on the right-hand side of coder to developer image. So let's go ahead and hop into some code and see how that's done. I'm going to go ahead and remove these. Right-click, remove. You can also say to go up and down. It will move them up and down in the stack here. Remove it. So we want to remove it. We'll go look at the XML now. We'll see we still have our list view. Let's go ahead and get rid of that because we're not ready for that just yet. And now when we get into the XML view, there's certain things that we're going to need to do. And what I like to do is set up the way the XML is laid out. I like all the XML to be each new item on a new line. So if I was to type in Android and give this an ID, you can see the IntelliSense there hopping in. And I could say, give it my ID inside of here. And as I started adding more properties, I could say Android, Gravity, or whatever we may need in here, and start providing it. It's all the way down. So this is the way that we could design it with the designer here. Another option in which, before we actually get into the XML, which is the third option, let's hop back to the second option, is a website called DroidDraw. Now DroidDraw is a Java applet or a Java application you can download that looks similar to this. Now I've already downloaded the application, and you can do so up top here, and I've just downloaded the Windows version, and I've already got it started up and going here. And it's a little Java applet. So what this is, it gives us a little kind of fake little emulator over here to the side, and allows us to give us a little more rich interaction with the designer. So we're saying we have a root layout up here, so we can say it's an absolute layout. The screen size is a HVGA portrait, and then we could change this to QVGA, HVGA, and we can come in here and say absolute, linear, scroll view, table layout. So these are the basic root layouts that we're working with. Right now you see that we're working with an absolute layout inside of DroidDraw. What this allows us to do is just pretty much click on these items over here inside of the widgets tab and drag one over. So now I have a button, and I want that button to be right there, and then I want this text box to be right here, and then maybe I want this image button to be right here, and then maybe a date picker to be over here, right next to the time picker. And I can kind of start dragging things around. And if I decide, oops, I don't want absolute, I can change this to linear. You see everything just kind of fell right in line. So I went back to absolute, but it removed everything when I changed it. So this kind of gives me the option to move things around. The button here, I can go over to the different properties here for the button, and I can say the width is wrap content, the height is wrap content, all the way down the line, and start changing properties. I can change the background color to be a different type of color. Maybe I want it to be a light gray, or I can just change it manually inside of this little color picker. I can provide some padding, some visibility. So these are some of the basic options to the views. It's not all supported in here. For example, if we go to edit text has a phenomenal amount of configuration you can do for it, but it's not all supported inside of here. You can see the number format is just integer, sign, decimal. If it's a number, capitalize, is it a password? So if you use the regular editor inside of inside of Eclipse, it'll work a lot better for you. So we can come back to the widgets, and you can add other widgets here. You can play with layouts. You can define different string resources. So I could say a new string resource such as foo, and the value is going to be bar, and then I could save that out. And what that will do is allow me to save it out as an Android XML file, so I could import those into my strings. Also work with some basic colors of what those mean. We can create arrays in here, which are a supported value inside of the res directory. And then just some basic support if you want to donate. This is kind of nice because if you just want to mess around and see kind of, hey, how do these things work? Maybe you want to click on the date picker here and just hit delete. It'll get rid of it. Same for the time picker. This is great for just playing around and wanting to know if you have a relative layout or an absolute layout. Kind of how would you lay this out and real quickly so you could see what things might look like. Mainly the XML. So I may have these three things over here, and I may want them like that, or maybe this, and I'll say, all right, now what does that XML look like? I can go up top here to the generate, and now down at the bottom here I have an output window, and in the output window I have a whole bunch of, see the scroll bar is pretty long. I have a whole bunch of text inside of here, which is the Android XML. So I can take this XML and I can copy it over into my Android project, and everything will work up just fine. That's kind of nice. It does give you some just kind of generated IDs, which is what it is, but you can kind of mess with those later. You can also load other XMLs inside of here, so you can open them up. You can export this entire thing to an APK, you put it to a device, you put some preferences, check for updates. There's a couple different things, and now it hasn't been updated in a while because the guy who wrote this does work for Google now, but it's kind of useful when you just kind of need to mock up some quick stuff. I don't use it that often, but when I do, it does save me a little bit of time. So I'm going to close this out. So our third option is going to be just writing the XML by hand. Now this is what I prefer. So if we hop back over to our device here, I changed it back to ADP1, go to Video Main XML. We do all the writing of the layouts directly inside the XML file. And the reason why I choose to do this is because it gives me much more flexibility into what I'm doing, and I also understand what's happening a little bit better when I can actually see the XML code. Yes, writing XML is not fun and not the greatest thing to do with my spare time, but it gets the job done and it's what I need to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this gravity option here. Now remember, we're going for a type of, pull up the screenshot here, and we are going for this view right here. So this screenshot, we would like to have the TechPub logo, and then the coder to developer and the coder to developer. So we have a relative layout, which is what's wrapping the entire thing inside of here. So inside the relative layout, I can say I have this image, and I want on the side of that image, put that here, and then put it there. So let's go ahead and do that. So what the first thing I'm going to need is I'm going to put this, get rid of this ID. I don't need the ID right now, I don't believe. So now we have the relative layout. What we're going to do now is we're just going to start writing an image view, and we have some different IntelliSense, and I'm hitting Control Space to get the IntelliSense. If I just start typing, I don't get any IntelliSense. If I hit Control Space, I kind of get some options. So I hit Image, I have an option for an image switcher, a image button, or an image view. In this case, I just want an image view. I just want to put an image on the screen. I just mouse down to it, and I'm going to hit Enter. Now I have the image view, hit Control Space again. Now these are the options for image view. Remember, the one thing that's going to be, the two things required for every view are layout width and layout height, which we see above right here in the relative layout. So those are two things we're going to need. I already know that I want this image, which is the TechPub image, to be the first one we're working with, and I do not want it to take up the entire width of the entire thing. So it's going to be wrap content, and I do not want it to fill up the top to the bottom, so it's going to be wrap content for the height as well. So to save time, I'm just going to copy this little piece of code here. I'm going to put it on the next line. One thing that I'm going to need, since I'm working with a relative layout, is a way to identify each view. And I'm going to do that by doing this, saying ID equals, do an @ plus ID, that's how we define the IDs, and I'm going to give it the name of the ID for the image view. I'm just going to call this header image. And then what I can do is just go ahead and close this out, this little piece of XML. And then what I would like to do also is say Android SRC, which is the drawable, or where the location of the drawable is at, and let's hit the Control Space. Now we have a couple options where we want to get the source for this. Is a color, drawable, ID. Well, it's going to be a drawable, and it's going to be the TechPub logo header that I've already defined and put inside of our MDPI folder over here. TechPub header logo. So there we go. There's our little logo. Notice on the background we have some coloring because we're using the dark theme in the Android, so that will just kind of fit right in. But otherwise it's a PNG that will kind of work on any color, but we're working with dark, so we're not going to worry about the dark spots inside of there. Hit Control Save. I can actually hop back over to the layout view, and I'll actually see the TechPub logo. So there it is. It's on the screen now. We can change the configuration to actually see what it's going to look like when it's in a regular phone configuration there. So we're going to go to Portrait. Let's go back here to the Video Main. So there, now we have our image view. Everything kind of looks good. So what we want to do next to that is put the image for the coder to developer. So now this page is going to be generated dynamically. So I could just do one thing to show you that it would work. So I can say image view. I can say Android ID. I'm going to give this an ID as well, plus ID, and I'm going to call this one icon. So it's going to be the icon for the show. Same thing for the layout and height. I don't need them to wrap, so I'm going to paste those, cut and paste to save some time. And then the Android source is going to be any particular different item in here. So this is of importance here, because if I don't provide a source, just delete it, it's still a valid view. I go back to layout, I'm not going to see anything. I just see the TechPub logo here. I clicked on it, so I have the red line around it, but I don't have an image next to it. Now there's not going to be an image at all right now, because this page is not loaded until after we select the category. So let's go back, and so here's our TechPub application. We select Coder to Developer, then this page will show up with Coder to Developer. If I go back and hit Concepts, I'm not going to see Concepts. So this image up here and this data, it's all changing. I don't have it until runtime, because I'm going to hit some type of repository, and in the future episodes we're going to hit a web API to download this information and cache it, and we're going to be hitting against that. So we're going to need to have a way to kind of see what we're doing is right, and we can do that through just testing on a device or an emulator. Or in this instance, what I can do just to make sure my layout's working properly is I could say SRC, and I can just throw a really cheap little icon in here, which I've done. It's drawable, and I say default video icon. If I double click on it, which is over here, I just kind of brought a little icon in here. It's just a little TechPub logo, looks like a video. And what that will do, if I see view, now that will see that I have something stuck right next to it. So this is the view that we're seeing here. So again, if I get rid of that, TechPub, say default video icon, go back over, and you're going to see this. Notice that actually in the background there's another image right there, another camera. That's because that's the TechPub logo, and we're using a relative layout right now, so everything's just stacking on top of itself. So it's like stacking in like a Z order type of index. So what I need to do is to tell Android that, hey, I want this image to be on the right hand side of that logo. So let's go ahead and tell it to do it. I want it to be this image right there. So let's go ahead and do that. Before we do so, let's go ahead and change this image. This is actually the incorrect image. That was the default video icon. I want this to be the category based icon. So I can say the category TechPub, which is the generic TechPub category. Hit save, we'll go back to the layout again, and we'll see that we have just a little kind of like the camera icon again. It's a little smaller, and there's a little gray background around it. So now what we need to do is we need to tell it we want it to be on the right hand side of the image view. Let's go ahead and do that. Android layout. Now when we hit layout, since we're inside of a relative layout, the view hierarchy is relative layout, and then we're going to go to an image view. So image view is realizing that it's within a relative layout, so it knows what are the options. It says, well, I know that I can do some certain types of layouts, so I want to layout to the left of, I want to layout to the right of, below, baseline, align to the parent being the parent view. In this case would be the relative layout. But I want to say, you know what, I want to align to the right of, and now we have to provide an identification icon. We can go down to the plus ID, control space, and I can say I want it to be next to the header image. Hit save, and I can go back to the layout again, and there it is. Now I've just forced this to be over to the right. Now there's a couple other properties that I have already created for this, so I'm just going to copy those over from a piece of code here, and we'll explain those here. So same type of thing, we have the icon, we're laying it out to the right of the header image. I'm going to move this little piece of code up so it makes a little more sense. So right of the header image. I've also added a few others here. Align parent top. So what that means is I want to align the parents here. What that really means is if we look at the top here, I want if this image is right here, I want the top of Coder to Developer, this icon, I want it to align the top of itself to that. So I don't want it sitting on the bottom, I don't want it over to the right, I want the top levels of them to be the same, so they're kind of equal. Okay, we're going to do a quick little detour in regards to density pixels. Density pixels, also known as DIPs, are a virtual pixel measurement unit that is used in defining the user interface, and it's to express layout dimensions or a position in a density independent way. This is sort of read directly from the Android developers framework documentation, which you can find developer.android.com under Dev Guide, under Best Practices, under Supporting Multiple Screens. You'll hear me use DP, DIP, Density Pixel, Density Independent Pixel, and they're all synonymous. And here's what the basic explanation is, and I'm going to read directly from the Android developer framework because they explain it very well. And it's located right here so you can follow along. The density independent pixel is equivalent to one physical pixel on a 160 dpi screen, the baseline density assumed by the platform, as described later in the document. At runtime, the platform transparently handles any scaling of the DIP units needed based on the actual density of the screen in use. The conversion of DIP units to screen pixels is simple. Pixels equals DIPs times density divided by 160. For example, on a 240 dpi screen, one density independent pixel would equal 1.5 physical pixels. Using density independent pixels to define your application's UI is highly recommended as a way of ensuring proper display for your UI on all different screens. So this allows you to use a kind of independent measurement format, density independent pixels, also known as DIP or DP. You can call them either one inside of your XML or Java files, and what that will allow you to do is create your screens in kind of one measurement that should be able to handle and scale accordingly to other screens. So again, the synonyms that you're going to hear from me are going to be DIP, DP, density pixels, and density independent pixels. So if you hear any of those, I'm referring to supporting multiple screen sizes with the density independent pixel documentation referenced here on developer.android.com. And then I'm going to say there's going to be a layout margin on the right hand side. And what that means is on the right hand side I want to be 6 device independent pixels. Sometimes they're called DIP or DP. That doesn't matter. And I'm going to say 6 pixels to the right. I want that space right there. So that space that we're seeing in this instance right here is the 6 DIP. So give me 6 pixels of space, give me a little padding here. I don't want the coder to developer text sitting right on the image. That's what that's doing. And then all around it I just want to give a little bit of padding around the entire image. Now this is important to note what we're doing here. There's no real concept of a stroke or anything like that. So if we hit Android, stroke, or border, there's no border or stroke that we can put around an image view. Now I don't want to have to manually download the images and add a stroke to them and save them locally and republish the application each time a new episode comes out. What I'd like to do is be able to get the image from the server and then just apply a stroke to it on my side to make sure they all kind of look the same. Because if they don't have a stroke, maybe it's a black background and it just shows an icon on a black screen and it just doesn't kind of fit uniformly inside of here. An example of that could be the concepts thing here or the building my blog. If we didn't have the white background here, such as we see on these items, then it would kind of just fade into the background and the UI wouldn't really look too clean, wouldn't look too fluid. So what we're going to have is just a little list here and we're going to put a white stroke around them. Now to do that we kind of have to be a little tricky, and what I'm doing here is adding a 1 pixel border around the entire image itself, and then we have already set the background, which is the category TechPub, which is the little camera we see as a source of the image, and then I want to set a background. Now I'm using something different here called a color, and the name of it is category BG color. If we look over inside of our values folder on the right hand side, we'll see that we have a colors.xml. If we hop into the colors.xml, we actually can define colors and give them names that have a meaningful name to us, and we can start applying these towards themes and styles that we'll eventually get to later on. But right now what I have is defined as a color by the name of BG color, category BG color, and it's just white, so we just defined it here. And I can come back here and I can say category BG color. Now what this means is, given an image, if we just draw this out here, given an image which has, it's this big and it's kind of, say it's just colored in and it's all red all over the place, and I gave it a 1 pixel padding, which would be up top here, so 1 pixel around the entire thing, there's 1 pixel of padding outside of it, and then I say, hey image, your background color is going to be white. Put the image here again, there's the image, and if I want a 1 pixel background around it, and let's just assume the color was blue, Set the background color to blue. What that's going to do is give me a 1 pixel border. It's actually going to color the entire background white behind the image, but it's actually going to give me a 1 pixel border around the image. So I'm actually kind of setting an image on top of a container of all white, which then gives it the illusion that it has a 1 pixel border around it. So I kind of have to trick Android into doing what I want it to do. Now if I go back to layout, you can see here we got our layout. Now I have a 1 pixel border around there. If I remove this right here, this Android background, save it, go back to layout, you'll now see that this 1 pixel border went away. Let's go back to video main. I'm going to put it back, go back to layout, and now it's back. So again, all we have there is the image. If I get rid of the image itself, the SRC, I'm going to save it, go back to layout, you'll just see now that we just have a little tiny dot, and it's kind of hard to see, but it's right there. And the reason it's so tiny is because we have told the image view that we want you to wrap content. And the wrap content is going to be the width and the height. So since there are no contents inside of the image view, it's just going to go to the smallest area it can, which is 1 pixel of padding. So it's 2 pixels high and 2 pixels wide, which is the little square you see. If we put the image back, the image category TechPub, and then if we look on the left hand side here, category TechPub, double click it, you can see the image is about that big, so it's going, the image view will scale to that size. Go back to layout, and you can see that the layout now looks like this. Okay. Now we also have, you notice if we go back to layout view again, that there is a little bit of kind of stickiness here in between them. They're kind of touching each other, and it doesn't really look too clean. We'd like to give a little space there, and maybe even a little padding around this thing. So there's some code that I've already written here. I'm just going to grab that and pull it over. And how this is done most of the time is a lot of times just playing with the options. I may be doing a lot of cut and paste here, but what I've had to do is throughout the time is just kind of play with these things. So maybe we can just get rid of this actually, and we'll start from that location here. Alright, well I want maybe TechPub to have a little space around it. So I can say Android padding, and then I could say, so you can see the padding option, I can say padding left, top, bottom right. And then I can say 5 DIP, or you can do DP. It's the same thing. Android will understand it the same. Go back to layout. Now we see I have a little bit of space here between it, so it's kind of nice. I have a little bit of space there. And then I also want to say that I want to make sure at all times that the TechPub logo is always to the left-hand side. I don't want anything affecting it. I always want to make sure it's pulled to the left. So I can say the align parent left is true. So I always want it to be stuck to the left-hand side of the parent. And so the parent in this instance is going to be this big thing here. And we have now, anytime I change this, this is always going to be on the right-hand side of it. And it's always going to align the top. So then what we need is one more thing here, which is a text view. And I'm not going to hop into here of all of the things with the text view. So I'm just going to kind of copy it over and I'll walk through it here explaining exactly what was done. We can actually say just text view, and I'm going to just backspace this to get some spacing, and I give it an ID of label. The width and the height here are wrap content. I don't want the content to be filling the top and filling the right. I don't want it to take up everything. It's going to be the right hand side of icon. So if we look up here, there's icon. It's going to be the right hand side of it. If I were to remove this, hit save, you see it goes, just kind of hangs out at the top. And it's saying align parent right and align parent top true. So what this one right here is, we're saying to the right of icon, and then right below it I'm saying to align to the parent right. So what does that mean? So if we go back to the layout again, here we're looking at portrait, landscape closed. Let's go flip back and forth. And this is another problem with the viewer here. It does not refresh at all half the time. So if we hop back over to the video main and we change this to landscape closed, we could see that my application is going to be on this side, and what it's going to do is have a wrap content align parent right true, so it's always going to stick its alignment to the right hand side. I'm going to say the text is just going to be my application, and this is just filler text here because this text is going to be overwritten. I'm just putting this here so when I'm designing my view I can actually see where it's sitting. This will be overwritten by our application. If we return back to the app, we will see if we hit coder to developer, the text actually changes to coder to developer. And I'll show you that when we develop the class behind it. And then we hit concepts, it changes to concepts. So this is just for filler text. This is kind of one of the tricks you kind of have to do to just see where it's going to lay out. I want the text style to be bold. Now inside of here I can actually do a few different things. Alright, now what we can do is we can say text style bold, and then I want the color to be another color that we define in the color XML file, colors.xml, and it's going to be category name color. And I go back here, category name color. Now it's a white color again. Now I could just say, hey, just call this white or whatever, but I'm using a name here. This is sort of similar to CSS, so later on if I decide that I want to change the way that the TechPub app works, I can slap a theme attribute inside of the application manifest, which we'll do in a future episode when we're theming this, and then I can say that I could change the theme or allow the user to change the theme at runtime to see what kind of app that they would like to use. So now we have the text view and we go out to layout, and so now what we have here is our application that looks just like this.